No matter how many times we hear the sounds, see the images, and read the words about this epic human struggle and the historic contributions by great leaders and other notables of the day, there are many untold stories of sacrifice and heroism, all in the quest for justice, for equality, and for basic human respect. This is one such story of the experience of young people during that turbulent time. My name is Lulu Westbrooks-Griffin. Today I, along with my niece Gloria Breedlove and my brother James Westbrooks, share with young people in our schools how we became involved in the civil rights movement in our hometown of Americus, Georgia, back in 1963. We knew there was a need for change. I guess you could say we became young soldiers, and the scars and the wounds from that long, hot, stormy summer run deep and will always be with us. We had only our faith to get us through it all. This is our story.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn you around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let your dogs turn you around, turn you around, turn you around. Ain't gonna let your dogs turn you around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up the freedom land. Ain't gonna let.
I was born in Americus, Georgia in 1949. I was the only one of my siblings born in a hospital, so my mother said. And we lived there until I was the age of 16. Americus was a small town, consisted maybe of 3,500 people, and the majority of them, I believe, was colored, as they would use that terminology.
Lulu and I grew up in the same household at 402 Academy Street. My grandmother, which is her mother, my grandfather, 3 uncles, 5 aunts, and we lived in a 5-bedroom house on a dirt road, and there were fruit trees, pecan trees, and an outhouse in our yard.
We had a good relationship. We visit each other's homes. They never lived in mine, but I've spent the night in their home.
The house we lived in was like a regular clapboard house, very poorly insulated. We had a tin roof on the house, which, you know, you can really hear the rain very, very severe when we had thunderstorms.
I was raised around Lulu over there by the cemetery. Their family home was over there, mine was too. We stayed right around the corner from each other.
Lulu and I were very close. She's 3 weeks older than me, my grandmother's baby daughter, and we was raised together. We went everywhere. Everywhere we went together and came back together.
Lulu and I were good friends in school. We were in the same class. And to me, I always liked both Gloria and Lulu. And I think that Lulu just had a little pizzazz, and she had a little fight in her. And that, I think that's what drew me to her.
My life as a child growing up was very normal. You know, we had churches. My parents took me to church on Sundays. We went to Sunday school, and that would be the longest day of the week to be anywhere, because we never went home until like late in the afternoon. We learned about the Bible early on. We learned values, principles, biblical principles that was important to my parents. And I can remember one of her fine lines was, everything starts at home and it spreads abroad. And she believed that, and she taught me that.
We attended an all-black school. We had all-black teachers, all-black peers.
It was nothing that I thought I was short of until I got a little older and was able to really read and understand that things weren't really normal for me, because I would see these blatant signs of segregation.
Blacks could only go to certain places, and the places they could go, it was like a side door of a back door.
If I wanted to go to America's Theater to watch a movie at the end of the week, take my girlfriend or go with some of the guys and watch a movie, we always had to go through the back door, and we always had to sit in the balcony. And the question always came to my mind, why must we always go in the back door?
You would see the word colored over a smaller fountain. Usually it would be dingy and dirty or lower to the ground than the other one.
Yeah, I just wanted to be able to go downtown and drink out of the water fountains, not with colored up there. And I just wanted to be able to walk through the stores without the people looking at me thinking I was stealing and just following you around in the store. And I just wanted to be free. And I did not feel that we had our rights here in America.
We would see colored or white signs on bathrooms, and even in the doctor's office. Sometimes you would go to a doctor's office and there weren't any colored doctors around that I remember at the time.
Blacks stayed on their side of town, white on their side of the town. We didn't mingle as far as school was concerned at that time.
When I was in high school, watching the way our schools were funded, the way athletic programs were funded, we only had one coach to coach our whole football team. America's High School had several coaches. Our budget was very, very, very low in comparison to what was going on across town. So in my mind, and as I made observations, the injustices, the inequities were just mounting.
From time to time, we would visit churches in the country. We would call it the country, but Americus was a country anyways. But you would go out in rural areas and you would see charred crosses in people's yard. I can recall one time there was a charred body hanging from a tree, and I didn't know if this was a person or what, but someone had later said that it was a young colored youth, black boy, that they had lynched and tarred and feathered him.
I remember several days of working very hard, and at the end of the day, the man would walk up to me and say, "Boy, I saw you playing during the day. I'm not going to give you your day's work. You only deserve $1. If there's observation from the field supervisor, generally speaking, a white person who was part of the farm, said that you were not working hard, no matter how many tomatoes or cucumbers or beans or whatever we were picking, it was their word against ours. And the thought occurred to me that this was something that I did not want to do the rest of my life.
The problems were so serious with Jim Crow and lack of opportunity, not being able to vote, the things that oppressed black people economically and socially in the society, so that eventually something had to happen.
I was feeling more and more like I wanted to do something.
It didn't really start as a mass movement until the young people got involved.
The February 1st, 1960 sit-in in Greensboro, North Carolina, had just spread across the South as rapidly as you could imagine. This week in 4 cities, next week in 20 cities, next week in 30 cities.
I kept hearing about SNCC and the students that were beginning to get involved with the civil rights movement. In Albany, Georgia, and Americus, Georgia, in Alabama, in Greensboro, where one of the first sit-ins started.
It didn't really start as a mass movement until the sit-ins. It didn't really wake up the country until North Carolina and those young people sat down and said, "I'm not leaving here until I get a cup of coffee."
We had our sit-in demonstrations, we got arrested, we went to jail, we continued picketing, and we got a letter from Martin Luther King and a remarkable woman named Ella Baker inviting us to a conference of student sit-in leaders in Raleigh, North Carolina on Easter weekend 1960. We gathered, we met other young people just like ourselves who had done the same things we had done. At that Raleigh meeting, we elected Marion Barry as the first chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. We agreed to set up an office in Atlanta in a corner of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference office. We later got space of our own on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, and I began spending more and more time away from my duties as a student, as a college student, in the SNCC office, helping them with their publicity stuff.
And I read everything I could get my hands on about SNCC.
So before I knew it, I was hearing about these sit-ins that was starting all over the South and Georgia and not far from my hometown.
My first knowledge of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was through my uncle James Westbrooks, who's 5 years older than I am. And when he went off to attend Fort Valley State College, I noticed when he came back home, he was secretly meeting in funeral homes and wooded areas with these white and black people who had came down from the north.
He took a year off that following semester and joined the Civil Rights Movement. He became a field secretary for SNCC.
Willie Ricks was one of the first freedom riders that I met. I had a chance to speak with. I spent a lot of time with Willie Ricks, and I learned that his goals and aspirations were pretty much the same as mine. And he said to me after spending some time with me that we need people like you, to quote him, to become more actively involved. Because the more young people we get involved, the more we can get young people to follow you.
The formation of SNCC, which was midwife by an adult, Ella Baker, was really, really important in getting college students involved and younger people in the movement, although we have to realize that Martin Luther King, for example, wasn't that old himself. But in fact, having younger people involved was important, but even people younger than the college students who were in SNCC, who were in high school and middle school and junior high school, elementary school, getting them involved was key.
Well, I was a small girl and I used to watch television and I used to watch the news all the time. And I saw the demonstration on it, and it seemed as though it was a mission that God had me to do, because I was determined that when it got in my hometown that I was going to participate in it.
I was interested in being a part of it, except that I didn't know how to be a part of it until my brother James.
I started talking with young black people, started with my family first, my sisters and my niece, my brother, and we all talked about it, and they knew that I was more actively involved at that point than they were.
James was beginning to help us see how important it was to take a stand.
And we talked, and my mom said to me, whatever you do, just trust in the Lord and be sure that you take everything to Him in prayer about this, if this is what you want to do. She said, but you need to recognize that these people will kill you before they allow you to do some of the things that you want to do.
And so when I seen two guys walking down the street with papers, and it was the first mass meeting, I called my mom and I got them to talk to her, which I had already discussed it with her before. And she knew that I knew the dangers of it, so she stood behind me 100%.
And yes, as it went on, it became even a children's movement, and not fun and games children's movement, but a movement where children began to understand that this meant them too, that they were going to segregated schools, that what their parents were doing was not an adult activity.
I lived down the street from Barnum Funeral Home, and that's where it started. Of course, we was young and we didn't understand segregation. We knew blacks were separated from white. We didn't understand civil rights to the fullest, but we knew that we wanted the same opportunity that the white have.
The first one that I attended was in the country, way out 27 at an old country church, and there were not many people there the first night that my grandmother took us. But then Allen Chapel, which Reverend Campbell was the pastor at that time, invited us or said that we could have meetings in town. And that's when more people began to come and act and just got more involved with what was going on.
And it was the SNCC volunteers during the summer of 1963 that went into Southwest Georgia, into Americus, into Albany, and recruited people to come to a community center, to come to a school, to be prepared to protest. And people were willing to literally put their bodies on the line.
At that time, I was 11 years old, and my uncle James Westbrook was very, very much involved in SNCC. As a matter of fact, he was a recruiter for SNCC.
Every night during the week at 7 o'clock, that was going to be a mass meeting.
Earthly home. We pray for those who are all in the struggle, be it north, south, east, or west.
And I was overwhelmed at looking at all the people and the young people, different ages, that really was psyched up about being a part of this movement. Friendship is one of the churches that we would come and have mass meetings. Sometimes you would have many young students and many adults line up to go into the meetings to see what the meeting was about. I remember people standing wall to wall or looking in the window, had the windows up, and you can hear the people talking and the leaders from way up on the corner. We was very energetic here, and this is a very powerful Baptist church here.
God's gonna trouble the water. You don't believe I can be. God's gonna trouble the water.
Mostly the town people, blacks, would come in. Might be a few black business people that had their own business here, but it was mostly the neighborhood people.
At the mass meetings, there would be motivational speakers and they would teach us the slogans for
we're
protesting.
Going to march, we're going to protest, and we're going to demand our basic rights of citizenship, by which the Civil Rights Bill guarantees our time has come.
The meetings just was energetic. The walls was bursting with songs and praises, freedom songs. I can remember, "Oh, freedom,
Oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me, and before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord."
to be free, to be free." I remember that.
We had these meetings. We talked about what was happening in Americas and what need to be improved in it.
And the meetings were focused on the real issues that were taking place. Somebody got beat, somebody lost a job, a white man accused someone of stealing, a white man spit on somebody. All kinds of things were going on.
This man, he struggled for equal rights.
You have to think about any mass meeting in the South in the 1960s as a combination church service and political education session.
Of course, the people that came down, black and white from the North, to tell us about what was going on, or the rights that we had and what we should have and what we shouldn't accept, and basically told us what we would do as far as marches and demonstrations, and mostly they talk about nonviolent, being nonviolent.
1963 was an extraordinary year, and the summer 1963 was just unreal. It's unbelievable what happened. It came about on the heel of Birmingham. We saw during the spring of 1963, hundreds and thousands of young black men and women. He was an elementary school student, middle school student, high school student, were willing in the city of Birmingham to face dogs, fire hoses, to submit to jail, to be arrested and to go to jail by the hundreds and by the thousand. As young people, we have been taught one thing in our elementary schools, in our middle school, in our high school, in our colleges. And then in the real world, we face something else.
We would hear the motivational speakers bringing true horror stories from different parts of the country, and we would hear of unsolved murders, missing people, people being lynched.
The fires of frustration and discord are burning in every city, north and south. Where legal remedies are not at hand, redress is sought in the streets, in demonstrations, parades, and protests, which create tensions and threaten violence and threaten lives.
His name was Medgar Evers. He was assassinated today in front of his home in Jackson, Mississippi. So today we bow for his memory.
All this would be discussed at the mass meetings. And the question always was, what are we going to do about it? Our report, being members of the Student Nonviolent Program, we got to stop it. We got to find some way to stop it.
They became, in many ways, the vanguard of the movement. They were people who were socially conscious, the kids didn't feel that they had that much to risk. Some people might say that they were naive because they were so young and they didn't realize exactly what could happen to them.
And we would literally come together as organizers and tell people if they want to desegregate the schools, if they want to desegregate lunch counters and theaters, bus stations, then they have to be trained in the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence.
I have to remind you, they're going to release the dogs on you. If a dog comes at you, just look it right in the eye and try not to show fear. The dog is much
Part of the meeting would be devoted to telling the participants what was expected of them and what they could expect. And aside from the mass meeting itself, in some parts of the movement, there would be extensive sessions in nonviolent training. So that with a rolled up newspaper, for example, you'd stand by the side and you'd beat the people who were going to sit in at the lunch counter the next day. You'd put your finger in their chest, you'd put your finger in their face, you'd come up and shout at them, you'd call them names, the worst kinds of names, to try to see if in this artificial situation they could use nonviolent resistance, they could resist striking back and hitting, because that just was an invitation to disaster.
Well, I think I had gone to several mass meetings before I realized how important it was to really take an oath. You had to take an oath, and the oath meant that we were to be nonviolent.
Don't strike back or curse if abused.
Don't strike back or curse if abused.
Don't laugh out.
Don't laugh out.
Don't talk to anyone.
Don't talk to anyone.
Don't block entrances to stores or aisles.
I remember I had a mass meeting that I started at Friendship Baptist Church in July, very hot day. My baby sister and niece, Lulu and Gloria, were among the young people that I had encouraged to go to the mass meeting. This was midday.
We wasn't allowed to just leave home, and had not it been for him, we probably never would be involved in SNCC. But we would come out with him faithfully every night to attend a mass meeting somewhere.
But it was their movement in a sense because they were the ones for whom these opportunities would open up and they could be able to take advantage of them if the change would occur. So as far as the troops on the ground troops of the civil rights movement, young people were just absolutely crucial.
I ain't gonna let Nobody turned me around. We're marching. Oh, yes, we are. We're marching for equal rights. Not tomorrow, not at high noon. We're not marching in the morning. I come to tell you we're marching. We're marching right now. The time has come for the nation to fulfill its promise. I don't know about you, but I got up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. Oh, yes, I did.
And everybody was just fired up that day.
They told us that particular day that we was going to go to the Martin Theater in the library. And both of these places was off limit to colored people, except that if you went in the Martin Theater, you would go through the back door and you would sit in the balcony.
You was always told it was a chance that you would not make it back home, that you might be killed.
And I told my mom before I left home that if they marched that day, that I possibly would not come back home because I was going to go on and demonstrate. So my grandmother said to me, she says, know what you're doing. And I said, yes, ma'am. She says, if that's what you really want to do, that's fine.
Turn me around, keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no stick. Turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no stick. Turn me around, keep on walking, and keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no water turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no water turn me around, keep on walking.
As we was going down Cotton Avenue, I had told them to be sure that they watched my signal. We was going to be completely nonviolent, but we were not going to obey their command to turn around because we knew they was going to tell us to turn around.
And as I came out, I noticed there was a barrage of troopers and guardians there. They had guns, they had the helmets on, they had billy clubs, they had dogs, they had hoses.
And they ordered us to disperse. And we refused to disperse.
We were determined that we was going to the Martin Theater, which was on Forsyth Street, and we was going to Walgreen, which was also on the corner of Forsyth. We was going to sit in at Walgreen, and we was going to go in the main entrance, front entrance of America's Theater.
And we were defenseless in terms of weapons and that, but the only thing we had was love and peace in our heart and our songs and our prayers.
And so I motioned for them to kneel, continue to sing, kneel down and start praying. I saw this big state trooper hit Lulu with a 33-34 ounce baseball bat. And blood started gushing everywhere from her head.
I remember getting clubbed over the head and had the hose drawn on me. The water was so profusely that it blew my shoes off my feet.
Not only did they hit her, they hit other girls, and they all, like I said, were 12, 13, including my niece, Gloria. And it was at that point that I really felt that I needed to be violent.
Oh, they was just beating people all in the head. I saw them beating those people, so I just got on in the back of the truck, and there was so many folk on top of me. I didn't know where I was.
So many of us were just thrown by our feet and hands in the back of these padded wagons they had there waiting to take us to jail.
I was paralyzed for the moment with anger based on what he had done to my younger sister and what he was doing to those young girls, and they all were on the front line that day.
I remember being so soaked from the hose, and blood was coming over my left eye into the corner of my lip. I remember tasting my own blood, and I could not understand what was going on.
I also knew that I could not afford to get locked up because we was at a very critical point in the movement in Americas, and we needed student leadership. So I reluctantly, with all the strength that I could muster, anger as I felt myself getting, I did not venture out and go out and attack this man or do anything to throw rocks or what have you.
I mean, you was treated like you was animals, but we was stuffed in a paddy wagon that only had windows in the very back, little tiny windows in the doors.
It was all like the dog catcher's paddy wagon, and it was all enclosed, and we could not see where we were going.
But we was just packed in like sardines in a can, and
yelling and singing, and the cops was swinging and beating us with their clubs, and it was just a real riot. They really set the riot off themselves.
I would say there was probably 8 to 10 big buses of people that were hauled off. Many of them was bleeding from the head, from the face.
When they arrested us, they took us down to the Americas Police Department. They took us in, and the only thing that I can recall from that moment was that they had us to write our names down so that our people would know where we were, and if they called, they would be able to tell them where we were.
Well, if you were a young person, you weren't in the movement unless you had gone to jail. I mean, you had to get arrested to be in the movement.
I remember I didn't have any shoes on, and I may have been crying at that point, but it was so exciting for me. I just knew it was my day now. You know, I had heard about all the other people going to jails in different towns, and so I was really experiencing what it was like.
And I just felt good about being a freedom rider.
I had no knowledge where they carried them, but I knew that they were in jail.
I can't remember exactly how we was booked or if we was booked. I just remember we was thrown in as jail cells. Of course, the guys were separated from the girls.
Later that night, we went back to church and began to go over what took place during the day of the midday movement, what had happened. I had not even gone home to say to my mom that Gloria and Lou had been beat and that they were bleeding, and I didn't go to her rescue as I thought I should have. My mother's reaction was kind of shocking to me, and she said to me, "Child, if y'all are insistent of marching up and down the street, you can't expect anything less than that. You can't expect more. They may kill you. They have no reservation about killing you."
That morning early, they transported us to Dawson Jail.
The city jail in Dawson, Georgia, which is Terra County, the sheriff there called back to Americus and asked him to come and get his niggers because we wouldn't be quiet. We would sing and pray all day, all night.
The reactions of the officials to them was as if they had no business out here anyway. They had no legal or constitutional right to be doing what they're doing, and so they deserved the worst possible treatment.
And I remember asking someone if I could see my mom, and I wanted to get some medical attention, and they refused both of them. No mother, no medical attention.
Well, from Dawson, Georgia, in the jail there, we was taken by at night in a paddy wagon, and like I said, we thought we was coming back to Americus. We didn't know where they was taking us.
They took us and transported us to what we still didn't know where we were going.
Somewhere it was more rural area than where I was used to living.
At that time, it was like night. It seems like, well, it was woods all around us, tall bushes and stuff. So we thought we was in the middle of nowhere. So it was frightening.
And the only thing I knew that I had seen that place before, but I didn't know where it was.
We was brought to this place. It was an abandoned stockade that had been there the building was used during this Civil War. It had, as we went in there, they was using their clubs and they was like pushing us and forcing us and calling us racial slurs and calling us stupid, pickaninnies, jungle bunnies, anything that they could think of negatively, they were saying to us. I was shoved to a cold, hard cement floor.
Get your little colored asses in there and shut the hell up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut the hell up!
Gloria was the kind of person that tried to protect me. She wanted to get help for my wound.
She need help. Mister, this girl need medical attention right now. She's bleeding awful bad.
She lost a lot of blood. She need to be taken to the hospital. She in bad shape. She need help.
There's other girls hurting here too.
Carol had a lot of fire in her too. She would stand up to the guards and let them know that she didn't like what was going on.
This ain't right. We got rights too.
Carol! You ain't got no rights in this hell jail.
At least tell us where we are.
Shut up! Shut the hell up!
I had to find out where my sister was, and I knew that there would be no effort on the part of the law enforcement people to provide any kind of medical care.
The conditions of the place was terrible, awful. We were not trained to be put in such a position.
No mattresses. We slept on the concrete floor.
Everything was filtered. Concrete was real nasty.
I remember there was bars on the windows. The glass was broken out of the windows. I remember there was a danger light there hanging.
Bugs came in, no screens on the windows, no window panes, no curtains for privacy.
We were there 2 days before we got anything to eat. The hamburger was rare. There was, you break your meat apart and you can see it's not cooked. And you didn't have the condiments on it you would want as a child, mustard, ketchup, and that stuff. You just had meat on a bun, and it was shoved to you. So we got these for once a day.
If it wasn't hamburgers, it was egg salad sandwich, which I hate today.
And it was mostly cake with the marinade on a bun. And we received that, and that had to last us all day. It was like being away from home and you're an only child, and you're in this room with a lot of people, and you just had to eat what somebody gave you. And it was very difficult, but we stuck together as a family.
Well, I had realized that I was pregnant, and I really, really wanted to be home then. I already wanted to go home anyway, but that made me really want to go home then.
We asked if we can see our parents, and they refused us to see our parents. And I looked around, and it was this building in the middle of nowhere.
I went around various places asking about who's in jail where and who had been released in jail from where. Those guys who had been in America's jail that had been released told me that Lou was not, and Gloria were not in the America's jail, city jail. And then there were some guys, young guys, who had been released from Sumter County Jail that knew them and said they were not there.
We did not go before a court magistrate. We did not have our rights or anything read to us. We did not know how long we was going to be there. The stockade had an old broken down toilet that had not been used for a long time.
Very unsanitized. When you had to go regardless. You couldn't flush.
Our feces piled up around the room in the open stalls because the only one toilet that was there didn't flush. We begged the guard for brooms and things to clean the cell, but he refused to give it to us.
The old shower head that dripped constantly warm water, and you have to remember this was in July.
Shower real rusty, we had to drink water. That's the only way we had to drink water.
I remember getting really ill and vomiting from both ends. I was very ill.
We were just pushed in here into this cell, and we was at the hand of these perpetrators, white perpetrators that had taken advantage of the jail situation. I was told by some girl, I know a couple girls was being taken out of there periodically, and one girl said she had been raped.
Well, me myself, I was frightened because I was took out of my jail cell by the trustee there. But I don't know what happened at that time other than he would give me something to eat and I'd bring a half a sandwich back over to the cell with the other girls and divide it with them.
About 2 or 3 weeks into the stockade, we got 3 tin cups with the little handle for the 33 of us to drink water from. And the water wasn't fresh. We would get the water from the shower head, dripping warm water.
So typical day, we just sit around and we talk. Some people wrote or did whatever we could to amuse ourselves with little that we had.
We did other things. There were girls that would get up and try a little talent show. They would try to sing and keep our spirits up. And
we combed each other's hair, which we didn't have but one comb, but we shared that one comb.
Well, I had Lulu and Gloria Westbrook, and I also had Sandra Russell in there. And I mean, everybody in there knew we was cousins, so we didn't just bond with each other, we bond with the whole group. We looked at each other as a big family in there. We didn't separate ourselves because some had relatives and some didn't, but we all bonded like we was all sisters in there, but it was no brothers, all girls.
We became one another's sort of nursemaid, or if somebody wasn't feeling up to par about something, or they was crying, or they wanted to see their mom, or, you know, you lose hope for a little bit.
The only thing that gave me some relief was to sing Christian songs. I used to sing then too. That was pacify us a lot of days.
Oh, shut up now, boy. Give you something to really sing about. Black and white together. Black and white together. Black and white together someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
You can't lift the tune unless your heart is in it.
I'm gonna let it shine. I've got the voice of freedom. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
When we think about home and how we were gonna get back home, we could sing like angels almost. It was beautiful.
Your dogs turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. I'm gonna let no dogs turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching to the freedom land. I ain't gonna let no water hose turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. I ain't gonna let no water hose turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching to the freedom land.
we sat in a corner and told different stories and stuff at night, you know, to keep us occupied.
We learned to pray. We had learned that from our parents, part of our upbringing. We had learned scriptures. So we would rely on our own faith to pass the time away.
We're pretty down right now. We just ask you just to come in here and just to lift our spirits and let us know that everything's gonna be all right. We don't know how long we've been in here so far, but we know that you'll take care of us. And we know that what we're doing is right.
And we was caught up in this together. So we was like one another's strength.
They threw a rattlesnake in, and oh boy, we was just terrified, and we screamed and ran.
Somebody help!
Until finally the guard let the snake out, and there was one girl there that was so afraid of the casted into the snake until she started to hallucinate at night and yell and go through changes, and we would all wake up sore from lying on the cement floor, and we would put her in a circle and keep telling her the snake wasn't there. We would console her until she fell asleep.
It was very horrible for us. I was traumatized. I had lost 10 pounds over a matter of a month or so. My sore that I had needed stitches, but I never received those.
Well, our worst fear is that we didn't know what was going to happen to us the next day, because we was told at one point that we was going to be taken out one by one and killed, and we was looking for anything to happen, and we didn't know when it was going to happen or how it was going to happen.
Every day you didn't know what was the mean crackers were capable of. I'm sorry for calling them crackers. You didn't know what they was capable of. What kind of spirit they was in before they left home.
I know they would come in there and they'd poke us with their billy clubs, and they would try to make us fight among ourselves.
Yeah, it was really scary, you know, like the next morning when it was coming in and stuff, you always wonder what was going to happen. Were you going home, or was they really going to take you out and kill you, who was coming? And when you made it so far in that day, then you felt a little relief.
I learned that they had also taken those buses to the prison, and I knew the prisons were one or two places in Lee County, in Leesburg, or out to the Sumter County Prison on the Vienna Highway. We had some insights that they were not at the prison out on the Vienna Highway, and learned later that they were, in fact, in the Leesburg prison.
We was hopeless. We was afraid that we would not ever see our parents again, because as the time went by, you know, weeks and days, and the sweat, the walls were sweating, you know, the temperature would get up to 115, and the walls would be sweating from the stench and of the place, and we began to have mucus. You know, we were filled with mucus. We had bites, because at night the cockroaches and the mosquitoes would come in and crawl all over us.
This was hot summer in Georgia, locked in jail. This was not a picnic, and this was not the Hilton Hotel. To be locked up in the Leesburg Stockade was not easy. This must have been and I know it was very difficult for Lulu and for Gloria. It is something that no human being, especially young children, especially young girls, should have to experience. Jail is not a pleasant place. I've been there a few times.
Oh, there were so many horrible things going on there at Leesburg, but somehow we continued to pray. We continued to sing the freedom songs. We continued to try to keep each other's spirits lifted. After so many horrible things had gone on, we decided to have two girls sleep in the daytime so they could set guard duty and watch at night.
As far as our hygiene is concerned, we had no way of, cleaning ourselves or protecting ourselves. And girls were maturing a little bit. Some of them had began, their cycle, and we started tearing parts of our clothing away occasionally to help them and protect them.
They had been in Leesburg prison from the time they left the march on midday Wednesday, and they had broken up the march and protest and carried them to Leesburg. And there she stayed, along with a number of the girls, for 30, 40 some days.
Leaders in the movement: A. Philip Randolph, president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters; Roy Wilkins, executive secretary of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People; Walter Reuther of the AFL-CIO; and the Reverend Martin Luther King head the march down Constitution Avenue to
the March on Washington was in many ways a celebration of the movement. The movement had had successes by 1963. It would have other successes in the years to come. So here are 250,000 plus people gathered on the Mall in Washington to celebrate the successes so far and to reinforce their determination to carry the movement forward. But of course, there's some people who are not there. And among them are these girls, stuck in the Leesburg Stockade, unnoticed, unheralded, uncelebrated. And the contrast, now that we can see from this great distance, of the 250,000 in Washington and the handful in the Leesburg Stockade is just so stark. Those girls are what the march was all about. The desire for human freedom, the collective desire of African Americans and our non-black supporters to advance freedom, to eliminate segregation, to end this enormous divide between black and white, which the country frankly hasn't gotten over yet. So the contrast between the people on the Mall and the people in the jail is just frightening. It's stark.
Because we know that what we're doing is not wrong, and that you want justice for everyone. And Lord, I just ask you just to help us get out of here and see our mothers, because we all miss our parents, and get back to
Yes, we would be singing and praying, and all of a sudden, the moment of truth would sit in, the room would go silent. There would be bouts of crying, reminiscing about certain foods, and at one point we just made up our mind that we never was going to leave Leesburg alive. I remember one day I had taken a nap or something, and I was waking up by all the girls gathered around shouting that someone was outside of the bars. So I went up to the bars as far as I could see, and I looked out, and there was a white man with a camera on his shoulder. I didn't know then, but now I know it was Dandelion.
And the first thing he told us to do was shh, and not for everyone to come to the window, because he came to take pictures. He didn't come to harm us, but he was there to help us. And in order to help us, he needed to take some pictures to get them back to the proper people.
And he said, freedom. And when he said that, we knew he was a freedom rider. And he started asking some of the girls to go up to the front of the bars so that they could distract the guard. And as they went, he began to take pictures, and he gave those pictures to a congressman.
You know, these young girls in Southwest Georgia really are heroines. If you remember that when I began to do this in 1960, I was 20 years old. I was by all accounts a man. And most of the people doing it with me in Atlanta and elsewhere around the South were at least 18, 19, 20 years old. We were college students. By the time the Americus movement comes along, we're talking here about high school girls, about young teenagers, about fairly vulnerable young people, not only vulnerable physically, but vulnerable emotionally. So they, again, pushed the envelope forward, and they raised a standard of how a proper young person ought to behave. Not only should he or she be well-dressed and clean-cut and get their studies and obey their parents and do all the things we want young people to do, but they also ought to be conscious of the world they live in. They ought to have a heightened political consciousness, and they ought to do all they can to eliminate this horrendous evil that is not only pushing them down, but push their parents down before them and their parents before them and every other black person as far as the eye can see.
Mr. President, I am compelled to call to the attention of the Senate the story of what is going on today in the small town of Americus, Georgia. It is a story of fear and hatred, of mass arrests, police brutality, incredible legal proceedings, and intimidation. And this is an area where Negroes represent about 50% of the population. Some were jailed in July for having the effrontery of using the front entrance to a movie theater. Mr. President, I wish the record could show the jail facilities in use in Americus, but I have with me some pictures that were secretly taken and smuggled out. They really make you wonder whether they could have been taken in the United States of America at this point in the 20th century. I invite any senators who may be interested to examine them.
Coming back home is always special to me and Gloria. This is our hometown. This is where we grew up.
My uncle used to work at James Chevrolet Company right there where the Chevrolet building is. And I would come up to visit him sometime on his lunch hour. And we would always walk by here looking in the windows of the Windsor Hotel. But we would put our faces to the window looking in. But that's as far as we can get to it because we was colored folks and colored people could not enter in these places unless they were workers. And they would have to go through the back door.
When we were growing up, the only time we could shop downtown was on a Saturday because of segregation. Today is much different.
Man, America sure has changed, hasn't it? We were not in a family structure that allowed us to walk out of the house and go where we wanted to. You know, we would come uptown sometimes.
This is where we attended school.
And this school was beautiful. It was brick and we had windows and it was like right at home. My home was right up the road and we walked, and when we got out of school we had no buses. We just walked home with our little books, and the cemetery was over there and we used to play ball, and our ball would go into the cemetery and we would be afraid to go over and get it, you know, and sometimes you'd get one or two kids and say, come on, go with me, and we'd hold hands and we'd go over to the cemetery to get the ball.
That cemetery, Eastview Cemetery, my grandmother, her sisters, her first husband, her second husband, are all buried in that plot over there. It's a family plot for the family. They're all buried there. That's Low Hill Street that goes up to Academy where I lived. And I used to come down that hill with a wheelbarrow with an axe in it and roam the cemetery looking for firewood. And I would have to chop the wood, stack it neatly in the wheelbarrow and push the wheelbarrow back up the hill and stack the wood, make the fire in the stove, start dinner preparation, chasing down the chicken, making a fire around a big iron pot, boil the water, defeather the chicken and dissect it. By the time I was 8 years old, I could perfectly do that without being told redundantly.
These are the streets we walked on. This is the neighborhood we knew, and many neighbors are still here today.
Yeah, I hadn't seen none of y'all since y'all left. So what are you guys doing? You buy that property there?
No, that property there, my mother used to live up here. We tore the home house down. And every so often I have to clean it off. It's good to see y'all. I'm glad y'all stopped and made yourself known. Y'all have the same, yeah?
But memories of that struggle will not fade.
It's like third grade to me, because I remember before, the first time Lulu and I came, it was, I always cry, but then it gives me strength. I don't know if I don't know if I'm angry, I don't know if I'm sad, but I know I'm ready. I'm still a freedom rider. I'm still as much right now a freedom rider as I was the day I was hauled off to Leesburg.
It's a lot of this undeveloped land, you can tell these are new homes because they weren't here before.
Highway 19. I didn't know Highway 19 go to Leesburg.
No, but we could have came in that way from and K-Ray, the women getting no air.
They were bored down. We didn't have air conditioning. That's something new on us right there, the air conditioning. We didn't have that. And we had natural. God given. This area here was the bathroom. It was one divided. It was one commode and a shower that sits on the other side of the commode. It was just a wall dividing it from the cells.
It looks very small now, sitting on the outside, compared to, it was really small on the inside with the number of people in there. Excuse me, that was state police.
We were smaller, that's why it looked so big.
Yeah. But that's right. And we always in this part of the stockade, that part of the front was like bars where the guards would be at, right? What I really remember is that these bars did not have glass on them. I remember the mosquitoes at night, and the cockroaches that was in there. And same thing we doing, fighting gnats and flies and all that at night from coming in there. I remember that part. Isn't it amazing how the back of this building looks the same? The only thing is that they used that same method to lock us in with them padlocks. We were just locked in there, just like animals.
Out there was just woods, just pine trees.
Yeah.
So I don't know which way Daddy and them came in from, but they must have came the back way.
You see those two back windows that sort of blocked over there? I think he must have came in the back door because there was a young black boy that was driving his Volkswagen. He said he was driving a 1960 something Volkswagen, and he said it was a standard shift. And the little black boy told him he knew where these girls were, but the SNCC office had sent him down here to take pictures because Marion Barry, who's best known for Washington, D.C. mayor, most recent, was one of the guys that objected to him coming down here to do those, because we can do our own picture. We don't need no white boy to come down here and do what we can do. And then the line said that he came there with this black kid, and he was laying in the back seat of the Volkswagen, and the black boy was driving the Volkswagen, but did not know how to drive the stick part, and he kept jerking around. And he told the boy, he said, I wish you wouldn't drive like that because you're going to bring attention to this Volkswagen. And then if they find me in the back of the car, you know what's going to happen to the both of us. So he told me that little anecdote about how he came here. But it must have been back here because he said that they was at the back of it.
Oh, that's probably. Anytime you see a bed
And I believe this whole area had bars around it. Remember? Let me see if this side has bars too. Yeah, see? All around here was bars, but they all been closed up with cement blocks. Probably put air conditioner.
Put air conditioning in there now. We didn't have any.
Sure didn't. And we didn't have any protection from the elements of the, the weather was hot and muggy, mosquitoes, flies, cockroaches. All them things was in there coming in at night. And they had roaches that had wings, didn't they, girl? Then remember, and they big.
Then we drunk water out the shower.
Out of the shower, we would drink the water from the shower head and slept on the floor. We had our own feces eventually piling up in that shower area because we was locked in. Just like you see that padlock at the back of this door now.
There's a wire down. You better move, Sandra. Ooh, don't get too close to that wire.
We came back here on our own to try to recapture some of the memories of this place, which was where we were housed for 45 days during 1963 civil rights movement. And 4 years ago, I came back here because I was working on a little project of my own. And this office had been renovated into a highway department office. And the girl that was here was a secretary, did not understand what I was talking about because she was 21 years old. And I told her that we had been captured and held here for 45 days at the age of 13, 12, 14, 15. And we was making a difference during that civil rights movement era. And it's a blessing to be able to look back those few years that we was here to come back with some of the latest survivors, significant people that made a difference in America's Georgia.
I think I would have suffocated one night when they threw us in that hole down there in Dawson if it wasn't for the rain. Because I tell you, it was hot.
That's right.
And they threw us down there in that hole when Benny Jean escaped, and we like to suffocate down there in that hole, and it was about 30 girls down there.
I think I was the one that rescued y'all from that because somebody twisted my arm since I was the smallest one and X-Man let us out, and he let us out.
Did you guys have to put your head down at the bottom of the door to
the
get
door to
air?
breathe.
That's what I thought. It was so
like a little,
dark and so
it was about this much spacing, and a lot of them was right there at the door trying to breathe, and we couldn't hardly breathe. And one girl told me, since you're so small, she said, ask him to let you out. And I said, please. I said, mister, would you please let us out? I said, we can't breathe in here. And he opened the door. You remember that? He opened the door and he let us out.
Oh yeah, my sister up in
But
Rochester.
we had been in there for hours. We had been in there for a long time.
We had to suffer for the girl that ran, but we
I
were
mean,
glad she got
we was
away.
wet with sweat, like, and
I know my sister up in Rochester was in there with you,
Yeah.
and she have told me what she went through. They call it what was it called?
The sweat box.
The sweat box.
So who was Mr. Story?
The
dog
he was the
catcher
dog catcher
in America. He was a white man
right.
now.
And he let this leak out so they would know where we were.
They knew where. I think they knew, some of them
But
said
see,
they knew where we were. But
like
we
my
didn't know
mama
they knew
said
where we were.
that when they had mass meetings and stuff, she said they didn't, at first they didn't know where we was
Right.
until this leak got out, and it was
Okay.
through him.
All right.
And after they did, they tried to get down here to see us,
And they
wouldn't let them in because they came to the end of the gate there and they turned them around. They sent stuff down here that we've never
they
received.
kept it in
In the
That's
back
right.
on
We
the
never
wagon
received
out the
it.
back. You can look
And,
out the window and see that food, those cakes and pies, those ladies would eat it up. They on the rather
And
than give it to
I
us.
remember
They let it spoil.
Mr. Story used to come over, and when he brought us our food in the morning time and stuff, he was checking to see how we was
But the
doing.
food he
And
brought
he was
was
taking it
hamburgers. I
back.
don't really remember
He was
the
taking it back to some of our parents to let them know how we
I don't
was.
even need a special McDonald's. It was that same kind of hamburger that had all that bread in it.
My heart is always here because my mom is there. I got family.
To come back, I realized that you didn't have to, but you did. And you just didn't get some information and run with it, but you came back to where it started and involved not just yourselves, but involved all of us that would pay attention or want to be involved. And I think that's a great thing to do. You could have been selfish, but you wasn't. Since it wasn't just the two of you, it was 32 of us. So you didn't isolate anybody, and anybody that you could contact and ask, to get involved, they did. And the ones that didn't want to, I understand that too. But I'm just so grateful that you are not selfish people, that you show, you demonstrate the way you was raised up, and you keeping the dream alive.
It's a wonderful feeling. I told you it before that this was a healing process. It bonds these particular special women in your lives together again. especially when you've been knowing somebody from childhood and that never have had the opportunity to spend any time with them. And these last couple of days, we've had time to spend quality time together. Because we were talking about the things that had went on in our lives so many years ago. And then all three of us was in that together, but or either if we were in different departments, there are things that each one of us remembers that will put the story together, because the experience that each one of these girls had, they were different because they were different people. Just Sandra can bring out things back. She's got a good memory of the things, the most important things that taken place during this time. And I believe it in my heart that he was there all the time. But most of us wasn't even saved then. We didn't even know Christ as being our Savior, and that he'll fight your battles. That he'll fight your battles if you just be still. Now we know these things. We've lived these things, and we're more wiser. And we know the Lord. We didn't know him so good then.
I'm bitter, but I'm trying not to hate, because I know that hatred is insane. And for me to allow myself to go there, I will have repeated the same type of behavior that I don't want to do. But coming here and visiting Leesburg has assorted effects on my the feelings. Some I can express, some I can't. Hopefully, even some of those who were captured into being taught this type of behavior without having a choice will be enlightened through this. And they will know that no human being should be mistreated and taken the advantage of because of the color of their skin or race or creed or religion or whatever.
I cherish the moments that we had together in jail, because y'all was my backbone. You was like my family. You protected me. When I felt lost and alone, y'all was there for me. And if you leave, it's just like a part of my life is gone. And it's like y'all a family to me. And I always want to be a part of y'all life. I don't want to lose it. Just being here together now, it's like a part of my life is being filled. It's like I knew all along it was something missing. But I could never piece that part of my life together until y'all showed up about 2 years ago. And we got together and we started reminiscing and we started talking about things. And I started remembering things that I had tried to block out. And I just thank God for us being able to be there together and working together like we did, because when we was young, and me most of all being younger, we was more like a family, and we kept it together while we was there. And right now, I wish that we could still keep it together.
But one thing I really never had a chance to ask my mother, what is it that I put her through? I suppose if I had a social worker or a therapist, I probably wouldn't have been able to articulate what I really was feeling. But it took me most of my early 20s, and nobody knows this but me and God, that these nightmares and these dreams that I was having, they persist right until I was about 27 years old. And these dreams primarily was about this paddock wagon that would, it seemed like it was going down Ashby Street. And I would be walking to Eastview Elementary School, and there was a hooded person with no face. The paddock wagon would accelerate as I would try to cross the school. And it would get faster. And
when it hit me, it would bump me and knock me over into a ditch there, and I would wake up screaming. And it was not until I had my own child to determine how important a mother's love must have been for. My mother did not know. My mothers didn't know. They didn't see us for 45 days, so it took me to have my own child to realize how important it must have been for them to know what we were. We were very strong people. We had a lot of integrity. And I'm not ashamed that I went to jail so young, because it was an honor for me rather than shame. I've learned to love everybody. I've learned if I hadn't gone through this, perhaps I would be dead, or maybe could have been in an insane asylum, who knows, with the pressures that we was under. But that 45 days was a short turn in my life that caused me to lose my innocence. But it made a better person out of me, which I hope that I could stand up and be proud of my race, my people. And we have to continue on. We have to continue that dream that Reverend Martin Luther King begun. We have to. Because if we don't, we're going to lose a generation of young people.
They never went back to jail after that particular episode of being in jail, but they did continue to participate in sit-ins and marches. They spent a lot of time going into America's Theater, went through the front door as they had sought to do on the day they was locked up, sat in the theater, they was escorted out by the police, and any and everything that we could do to make our presence felt by marching and protesting, Stealing Americus, we did that.
We are so lucky today and so blessed because of the efforts, the pain, the suffering that these young people endured.
The kind of sacrifice they had to make, 45 days in a stockade in Leesburg, that is the kind of sacrifice no African American ought to ever have to make again, whatever the age.
For girls like Lulu and Gloria, they were acting in a tradition, and they were helping to create a tradition. They were really examples of children acting for their rights in places all over the South. And they were unknown or overlooked, but they acted for their rights, and what they did was very important. And when they were arrested, they may not have understood this broader context of how the whites were responding and what was happening and what were all the implications. And they may not have understood why they were put in prison, and the horrible conditions that they experienced were there for them. But what they did was fundamentally crucial, because it showed the authorities in those communities that they were willing to stand up, that they would act on a matter of conscience, and no matter how young they were, that they had good sense and were in their right minds and knew what they wanted to do, and they were willing to do it.
These girls held up a standard of bravery and courage and determination that ought to send a strong message to others of today's generation that while you may not do exactly what they did, you can do something. These girls weren't college graduates, they weren't PhDs, they weren't, high-flying lawyers, they weren't great entrepreneurs. They were girls. They were girls. And we thought then that girls were sort of, off to the side, they're soft, they can't do these kinds of things. These girls prove that girls can do anything girls want to do, and that ought to be a lesson to girls and to boys today.
God, we just thank you for, like you chose your 12 disciples. You just one day said, follow me, and we did it. We just simply went, and you used us, God, at that time. And Lord, we was under the voice of your mighty anointed one, Dr. King, and we were the instruments on the first line. He's not gone. Could it be that we're the one to take the baton and go, Father? Oh, Father God, let us stop just celebrating Martin Luther King and continue the dream that he started, God. It's up to us now. So we must take control. And we can only do that through your holy power, God, through your spirit. Because truly right here was prayer that sustained us and kept us going on through the many happenings and things that was upon us, God. We would sing a song, we would say a prayer, and miracles was wrought right in front of us. Lulu bleeding and falling into unconsciousness. God somehow miraculously one day she was all right. Vernon throwing up every day. Different ones being sick and attacked, and rattlesnake being thrown in. But God somehow you kept us. You kept us, God. Now we are ready. What is it that you will have us to do, God?